I'm going to start working on the pin washes, the panel lining, all of that stuff this morning. Now remember, it's got a coat of this VMS satin varnish on it, just to make it a little easier to work with. And what I've got here is some Abteilung 502 Starship Filth. And then here in my palette, I've got some VMS Oil Expert. It's this stuff. It just speeds up the drying time of oils. That's mainly what it does. And I mixed it with, it's about 50-50 mix with just some Artist's oil, odorless terpenoid. And the reason I mixed the two together is just to stretch out the Oil Expert. The odorless terpenoid is easier to get, cheaper. I've got it in greater quantities, so this is small bottle, comes from Poland. So I'm just stretching it out. You can use the Oil Expert on its own as a substitute for enamel odorless thinner or for the Artist's terpenoid. But like I said, I'm just stretching it out. Now, it's purple, but it doesn't seem to affect the color in any way when you put it on. I've even tested it with white, and it didn't turn out purple. So I guess it's just to help show that, you know, you've got some Oil Expert in there. Now, there's a lot of ways to do an oil wash like this. I could mix it up here in the palette. What I've started doing more and more, and I've actually been doing this for a couple of years, is I just put some oil on the cardboard palette there. I just kind of work it around like that. And eventually what I get is, this is kind of oily here in the palette, and I've got a big mess over here, but it just gives me something that I can kind of control how much stuff I've got on it. Now, I'm not worried if this is messy, because this thing is going to be weathered. So if it spreads out a bit because of that surface texture, that's fine. Because in the cleanup process, I can get rid of any of that I want, or I can just streak it, you know, use it however I want. In these mechanical areas like this, I'm going to go in kind of heavy and just let that stuff flow through there. Really want that to look grimy. Of course, over that cable right there, that's going to really help that stand out. I'm going to put some over the engine. Even though I've done some panel lining on that before, I want a little to help just those volumes stand out a little bit. Now, along something like right here, where the engine joins to the body of the thing, there's a gap there. So any of the wash that I put on is going to flow in there. So what I can do is I can just go in here to the straight paint and get it a little heavier and just apply it like that. I can give that a little time to dry, and when I blend it in, it's going to create a bit of a shadow and some distinction there around that. So that's another reason I like using this method of, you know, make it up as you go along in terms of how thin the wash is and how much paint you're using. It gives you just a lot more control. Now, a question I'm asked with reasonable frequency is, you know, what brand of oils do I recommend? Now, I usually, you know, like anything that I talk about, there's never a simple freaking answer, because I won't let there be a simple answer. You know, I tell people the brands that I use, but my advice is just get good oils. Don't go find the, you know, 24 oils for $10 kind of things. Yeah, those can work. I've used them. I've tried them. That's why I don't recommend them. I've tried them. You can make them work, but they tend to be very cheap, very grainy in terms of their pigmentation. You know, I've applied washes with them, and the wash will go down and it'll look fine at the beginning. And then by the time it dries up, it's spotty and grainy, and the opacity varies, and sometimes they wouldn't stick really well. And I mean, there's just all sorts of things with them in terms of why they didn't seem to be optimal to use. So my advice is get the better quality Winsor & Newton stuff. Get the Abteilung 502. Get the Wilder oils. Get the Ammo MIG oil brushers. If you're thinking, yeah, but I just want one recommendation, go the Abteilung 502. They have a lot of colors that are made for modeling. They work really well. You're going to get good quality with them. There's good quality control. It's going to be consistent. You don't have to worry about, am I going to get a good one this time and a bad one this time? And so if you're just looking for just one brand, that's the one I'd go with. But I use all of them. What I do is if I see a particular brand on sale somewhere, that's what I go for. And if I get multiples of the same color, that's okay, because every one, even if they're called the same thing, are usually a little bit different. You never know when you might want just a little bit of a change in terms of the color. Now, when it comes to the cleanup, there's several ways that I do this. You can go in with a cotton bud, and it works pretty good. Because this is such a textured surface, you see how it's not really getting down into those nooks and crannies. Now, this is dry. Now, I can put a little bit of my Oil Expert in the palette here and put that on the Q-tip and wipe off most of it and use that to clean it up. And that works pretty good too. That picks up more of it. And you're going to get some smears, but that's okay. And see, I'm just going to go up and I'm going to grab some of those areas, just pull them down. And you notice how what that's doing is it's building in stains, smears, streaks, going ahead and weathering it. Now, I'm not being real precise here because I can go back as that dries up with a brush and refine it somewhat. But most of what I'm doing here is demonstrating you can use a Q-tip. Q-tip works better on the smoother surfaces. With this textured surface, it's not the optimal way of doing it, but it works, and it gets large areas of it cleaned up at a time. So even if you're just using it for, area cleanup, and then you go in with something more precise, they're handy to have around. Now, another thing that I like doing is using a brush, and for this I use a smaller brush. And again, this is just a cheap synthetic brush, nylon brush. And here I just go in and I just start blending in. Got to turn it so I can see it. Got some glare on it. But just start blending in those oils. And by blending in, that's actually not a single thing that I'm doing. In some cases, I'm pushing the oils back towards the feature that I'm working on. In other cases, I'm pulling them away and then dabbing it around, spreading it out, cleaning my brush off, and cleaning up the oils. It's another question I get. Okay, what do you mean precisely by blending in? So blending is a process. It's not a single motion. It's not getting rid of oils. It's not cleaning it up, or enamels. You could be doing this with enamels too, but rather it's a series of brush stroke types that the net effect is to leave the amount and opacity of oil or enamel product to achieve the effect that you want. So blending up on the top of this feature, for instance, is going to be mostly pushing that oil back to it and cleaning up the excess around it so that there's just a little bit of a distinct line. But on the lower part of it, I want to do more of a streaking motion so that I get some staining benefit from the oil. Now I can always go back and later and add it, but I get some staining benefit from the oil, and that's blending in also, but it's leaving a lot more oil behind. So when you hear blending, don't necessarily think, okay, that's one, block of motions that you do for blending. And streaking is a completely different thing. Blending in the oils is simply creating the effects that you want. At least that sounds really impressive if you're a YouTuber and you say it that way. I see, like on an area of heavy stain right here, just to kind of belabor the point, I'll go in from the top to push that oil back down towards that bolt. But then here along the sides, I'm wanting to eliminate more of that oil. So I'll use more of the odorless thinner there. And that stuff that ran across there, I'm okay with that. That's streaking. But then down here below it, I'll start pulling the oil down. And yeah, I'll clean it up some more because I don't want it to be so heavy. But that will provide some streaking right there. And I'm just going to leave that like that and let it dry a little further. So the other beautiful thing about oil is you can go back and adjust it later. So when you get it, if you get it partially like you want it, leave it and come back. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and clean off the top of that bolt. There. Now that'll help it stand out. Now once that dries, like I said, I'll go in and I'll stretch that oil out a little more. And by dry, what I mean is I'll let the thinner dry, but the oils will still be workable. So I'll let the thinner dry, and then I'll go back in and I'll streak that down a little more. And, I can always go back later and add more streaking. So that's another way that I do it. Sometimes I just stipple the stuff around, where hatches are like that. They're going to get grimy from people opening and closing them and, fluid getting out. So stippling stuff around like that can make it look weathered. All right, I'm going to keep working on this. I've got some more parts that I've got to do. And I'm going to like I talked about, I'm going to let this dry a little bit and then further manipulate the oils. And I'll add some in if I think they need a little more. Like I think I cleaned up a little too much around this in terms of the top of the bolt. So I'll add a little more of a pin wash effect around it. But then I'm going to streak that remaining oil down and just work with that a little bit. And you can see where the oils are better once the terpenoid, the thinner, has dried off. So like right there, I don't want that tide mark right there. So I can just take a Q-tip that's slightly damped and just move that around. So I'm just going to go through a process like that of just back and forth, cleaning up, enhancing where I want it. Main thing is to get all the details to pop out and start some of that streaking, which I'll go in later and develop anymore. But like I said, I'll call this a video. And thank you so much for being a patron. And this is a Patreon exclusive. And I am thankful for the support that you give me and my family. It means a lot to us. It really does. So thank you. And we'll see where we go with the next episode. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.